Let's talk about, one of the first ones that comes up chronologically, I think, is the Boalt Gallery. And Ron Boise, who is a sculptor, his Kama Sutra sculptures, and this was 1964. A gentleman by the name of Muldoon Elder was the owner of the gallery, and I believe he was the individual who was arrested.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about what was involved in this, and why is this something that is well remembered today?
Well, I think it's well remembered because it was such an outstanding trial. The Boise sculptures were a group of figures made of metal about 18 inches high, and I have one here that I could show if you want me to bring it out.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah. And they all depicted various positions of sexual intercourse as described in the famous Indian Kama Sutra. And they were displayed along with a number of other Ron Boise pieces in a small gallery right near the City Lights bookstore in North Beach called the Boalt Gallery. And Muldoon was the founder and owner of that gallery. And the police came in and they said that this obscenity had to be removed, and Muldoon wouldn't remove it, so they arrested him and confiscated all of the Kama Sutra sculptures. And we had a jury trial on the matter of whether the obscenity law of California was breached by this display of the Kama Sutra sculptures. And the trial was absolutely incredibly interesting because on one side we had the Catholic Archbishop of San Francisco, who testified for the prosecution, and we had the director of the Legion of Art Museum, who testified for the prosecution, and we had a number of other people, and they all were talking about this definition that the Roth case established in 1957 was this material utterly without redeeming social importance. Mm-hmm. Redeeming social importance was the key. And of course the Archbishop said, no, this is not socially important, this is socially negative because of the depiction of sexuality. Sexuality itself was thought by these people to be something that should not be openly discussed. And just the matter of showing sexuality was considered to be by them obscene. On our side, we had Walter Horn, who was the chairman of the UC Berkeley Art Department, and he gave an incredible description of sexuality depicted in fine arts through the generations, starting with the Greeks and the Romans, and we brought in all sorts of Greek and Roman art, and then the Renaissance painters, and we had a complete discussion for a day at least about sex in fine arts. And then we had on our side the director of the Museum of Modern Art here in San Francisco, and we had Alan Watts, who philosophically thought that this material was presenting a philosophical message, and he had an incredible line that broke up the whole courtroom. The test for what is obscene was that the material had to appeal to the prurient interest, meaning an interest in sex. And so the district attorney asked, or maybe it was me, I asked Alan Watts whether this Kama Sutra sculpture made out of metal appealed to his prurient interest. And he leaned back and he said, well, I would sooner make love to a bicycle. So there were all sorts of lines like that in the trial. And I was helped in this trial by a very good attorney named Ephraim Margolin, who represented the clerk at the Boalt Gallery, who was also arrested. So there were two defendants, two defense counsel. And between the two of us, we had an incredibly important list of people who were our defense witnesses. And the jury was out a couple of days thinking about this case, and finally they came in with a not guilty verdict. I remember talking to the jury about this particular sculpture and showing them how delicate it was, how these two people were in love or love-making, but they were doing it in a very loving way with their arms around each other. And I said, Ron Boise's delicacy can be seen with this hand right here touching the back that isn't there. And that is about the most delicate kind of touching you could have. So I was trying to impress upon the jury how artistic this was. And actually, our expert witnesses had testified to how beautifully, technically, this sculpture was made, how the fingers were very unusual, the toes, the body, the shape of the body was so perfect and beautiful that it obviously showed a lot of artistic talent.